5. The shape of things to come. Thomas was playing a précis machine, which he had set to give him all general information about Astrobe. It was a good machine that would give answers to questions and depart from its formulae to give personal opinions when asked to do so. Golden Astrobe is an urban world, a world of cities, the précis machine played. If a man is important, then a city is more important, and a very large city is still more important. When we have all become one perfect city in our totality, then our evolving will be completed. The individual must pass and be absorbed. The city is all that matters. A city is more than the totality of the people living in it, just as the living body is more than the heaped-up quantity of the total cells in it. When the cells consider themselves as individuals, that is cancer in the body. When men look upon themselves as individuals, that is cancer in the body politic. The great cities of Astrobe in our present evolving phase towards the one great city are Cosmopolis, the capital, Potter, Ruckle, Ciudad Fabella, Skystown, Chesham City, Wendopolis, Metropole, Fitztown, Doggle, Culpeper, Big Goby, Griggs, and Wootown. Of these, Cosmopolis the capital is the most perfected, and Wootown is the least. Yet there is hope even for Wootown. All things achieve salvation in the great synthesis. All these cities are quite large, it having been found several centuries ago that a city of less than 25 million persons is not economical. But beyond these, there is no point in multiplying cities or people. The small annual increase that is allowed for Astrobe is balanced by immigration to colony worlds. We do not believe in heaping up people. "What about Cathead?" Thomas asked the précis machine. Cathead is the cancer that is being excised from this world. It is the cancer because the inhabitants of Cathead regard themselves as individuals, and believe in the importance of themselves. Yes, Cathead is quite large, the largest of all cities, larger even than Cosmopolis the capital. We will leave Cathead out of account here, since it is not typical of Astrobe. There is no poverty on Astrobe, since all persons have access to all things. There is no superstition, nor belief in anything beyond, since there can be nothing beyond. Any beyond will ultimately be evolved from the here. While Astrobe is the highest thing, there can be nothing higher. This is the essence of the Astrobe dream. There is no sickness on Astrobe, either bodily or mental. There is no nervousness, apprehension, or fear. All arts and all sciences are open to every person. Travel about the world is by instantaneous conveyance. The weather and the oceans have been controlled. There is no feeling of guilt, since freedom from every repression has been achieved. There is no cruelty or hate. There is no possibility of sin, since there is nothing to sin against. There is every luxury and every interest available to everyone. There is almost perfect justice. The few remaining courts are to provide redress to inequities brought about by misunderstandings, and these become fewer and fewer. "It has its points," said Thomas, and rubbed his hands, "and yet it seemed as though someone has recounted all this long ago." New dimensions of pleasure are achieved daily and almost hourly, the précis machine played. All live in constant ecstasy. We are all one being, the whole world of us, and we reach the heights of intense intercommunion. We have come to a single mind and a single spirit. We are everything. We are the living cosmos. The people of Astrobe do not dream at night, for a dream is a maladjustment. We do not have an unconscious, as the ancient people had, for an unconscious is the dark side, and we are all light. For us, there is no future. The future is now. There is no heaven, as the ancients believed. For many years, we have been in the only afterlife there is. Death is unimportant. By it, we simply become more closely integrated into the city. We leave off being individual. In us, there is neither human nor programmed, but we are all one. We verge to our apex, which is the total realization of the world folk. We become a single organism, even more intense and more intricate. The city itself.
I remember now who it was who limned this all out before, said Thomas. It was myself. What other man makes a joke about a tree, and the tree bears fruit? But I like it more now than when I first mocked it. It sounds better when it comes tumbling from another mouth, even a tin mouth. What shall I be enchanted by my own spell?
We all say the same things. We all think the same thoughts. We all have the same feelings and pleasures, the Précy machine played. Both love and hate disappear, for they were two aspects of the same thing, a mantle that was worn by our species in its childhood. We stand unencumbered before the Graian sun. We are the sun. We are everything. We merge. We lose both being and non-being, for both are particulars. We become the extensible and many-dimension sphere that has neither beginning nor end, nor being. We enter the calm intensity where peace and strife cancel each other out, where consciousness follows unconsciousness into oblivion. We are devoured by holy nothingness, the big O, the ultimate point for all us ultimates.
Shove it, my little mechanical mentor, shove it, Thomas More said. I made it up. I invented it. It was a joke. I tell you, a bitter joke. It was how not to build a world.
But I am not finished, the Précy machine played. The vision still ascends. Well, no, it doesn't exactly ascend beyond a certain point, since it has reached a sphere where there is neither up nor down. But it becomes intensity, still more intense, and
shove it, little tin horn, shove it, Thomas laughed.
You are not impressed by the golden astrobe dream that is becoming reality? The Précy machine asked, with apprehension, or with what would have been apprehension if that still obtained on astrobe.
Not very much, Thomas said. I invented it all for a sour joke. I mustn't let the sour joke be on me.
And yet Thomas was impressed by the astrobe achievement, if not by the astrobe dream. There was a terrible clarity running through everything, a simplicity containing all the complexity. In matter and mind, astrobe was neat, and the rains fell always at their scheduled hour. That was something. There was order. Astrobe was an urban world. All its great cities were really one, in a single close cluster. The countryside was little used. There were the automated production strips, and there were the feral or wild strips to keep the balance. Few people lived in either. It was the cities that were the heart of Astrobe, and the people of the cities were born knowing everything. There were no individuals with sharp edges. There were no dissenting or pernicious elements. There was the high, flat plane of excellence in all things. What can you say against a world that has gained every goal ever set? There was pleasant termination available as soon as the touch of weariness set in.
It sets in with me already, Thomas said. I have to hold on to myself with both hands every time I pass a termination booth.
But one thing seemed to be lacking on Astrobe, and it puzzled Thomas.
Where do the people attend Mass?
He asked as he stood in the middle of the golden cosmopolis.
They don't, Thomas. They haven't for centuries, Paul told him. Oh, there are a very few who do sometimes. I do myself on occasion, but I am a freak, and usually classed as a criminal. And in Cathead, there has been a new appearance of the thing, along with other oddities. But not one person in 10,000 on Astrobe has ever attended. Are there no churches at all, then? In Cathead and the Barrio and the Feral Strips, there are a very few that might still be called by that name. Such buildings as remain in Cosmopolis and the other cities are under the Department of Antiquities. Some of them have period statuary that is of interest to the specialist, while Mass itself cannot be found in any of them there. The replica can be played on demand. Let us go to one of them.
After groping about in some rather obscure streets that Paul knew imperfectly, they found one. It was quite small and tucked away in a corner. They entered. There was the sense of total emptiness. There was no presence.
I wonder what time is the next Mass, Thomas said. Or the Mass that is not quite a Mass. I'm not sure that I understand how you put it. Oh, put in a diamond off door in the slot and push the button. Then the Mass will begin.
Thomas did, and it did. The priest came up out of the floor. He was not human, unless he was zombie human. He was probably not even a programmed person. He may have been a mechanical device. He wore a pearl grey derby hat, swish boy sideburns, and common green shorts or breechcloth. His dilapidated torso was hermaphroditic. He, or it, smoked a long, Ouija weed cigarette in a period holder. He began to jerk and to intone with dreadful dissonance. Then a number of other contrivances arrived from somewhere, intoning in mock chorus to the priest and twanging instruments.
For the love of St. Jack, what are those, Paul? Thomas asked in bewilderment. Are those not the instruments described by Dante as played in lowest hell? Why, the whole thing is turned into a dirty burlesque, Paul, played out with unclean puppets. Why, Paul, why? Oh, it had really turned into such a thing before it died, Thomas. This is what the church and the Mass had become when it was taken over by the government as a curiosity and an antique. Well, the replica Mass ran its short course to the jerking and bawling of the ancient ritual guitar. At sermon time was given a straight news broadcast, so that one should not be out of contact with the world for the entire 15 minutes. At the consecration, a sign lit up. Brought to you courtesy of Gralio Grape Ape, the finest of the bogus wines. The bread was ancient-style hot dog rolls. The puppets or mechanisms danced up orgasmically and used the old vein needle before taking the rolls. How do you stop the dirty little thing? Thomas asked. Push the stop button, Paul said. Here, I'll do it. And he stopped it. Why, I wonder how it all came about, Thomas said. That snake on a stick, is it meant to be Christ? Is that leering whore holding the deformed monkey meant to be the Virgin? A dirty little burlesque? A dreary bit of devil worship? But even dirty burlesques are not made out of nothing. Had the Mass really fallen so low? So I have read, Thomas. It fell to just this low estate before it became ritually frozen. Then the church was only a thing, like other things, Paul. And it died as other things do. So most say. The Metropolitan of Astrobe still lives, but he is a very old man, and the office will probably not be continued beyond his lifetime. There is a slight revival of the church in Cathead, as I mentioned. Acceptance in Cathead is enough to damn a thing in any clean region. Cathead, that cancer growing on the fair planet. In that feral strip, there are small groups who keep a rite that is not burlesque. Well, I never had too much faith, Paul. I believe for a while in the mornings, if I wake and feel well, but my belief is almost always gone by noon. Somehow I thought that the church would continue, but I don't know why I thought so. It would, after all, be an anomaly on rational Astrobe. I'm glad to see the old thing gone. I'm not, Paul said bitterly. I came to it when it was a black remnant in my darkest days in Cathead. But it's more than all the other things. Yes, I'm crazy, Thomas. I have bone splinters in my brain. But it's curious that you are a saint in the church in which you don't believe, which you're glad to see gone. Thomas laughed loudly and clearly, a really cheerful thing, high and fluted. He and Paul went out into the sudden golden daylight. Aye, they were right to push the old fraud into a corner and turn her into a dirty burlesque, Thomas said. If the tree does not bear fruit, cut it down. Thomas spent entire days marveling at the wonderful ways of Astrobe. He had been something of a skeptic at first. Now he had swallowed bait, hook, line, rod, and fisherman's arm. He had become a sudden strong advocate of the Astrobe dream, and yet he wanted to look more deeply into the workings of the thing, to examine its more distant roots and sources. It is hardly to be believed, he said one day when he had his retinue with him. Come, people, we will seek more of this. We travel again. Against the advice of his mentors, Thomas had decided to take some time to examine Astrobe. There is no point in travel, Thomas, Kingmaker had told him. It is all the same everywhere. That is the beauty of Astrobe. It is the same everywhere. Go where you will and see what you see, Proctor told him. But do not believe everything that you think you have seen. When you get back, I will tell you what you have seen. There have been sad cases of men who say things falsely, and I had to take a hand. I do not want to do that. Luck be on thy head, good Thomas. You will not know how to see, Thomas. You will not know how to at all, Fabian Foreman told him. You haven't the eyes for it. You will see it all from the wrong side. You are an awkward man, Thomas. In that hour it will be given to you what you will see, Potscamp told him. And a little later, in a secret place and out of context, you will sit down with 9 entities, one of them myself, and you will be told what these things have been. You see now toy things with toy eyes, but in that time you will be given seeing. Thomas had a loose retinue. He had chosen some of the members, and some of them had chosen him. It wasn't the group that the big men would have picked for him, though there was one spy for the big men in the group. There was his old Earth-to-Astrobe pilot Paul. There was Scrivener and Slider. There was Maxmel and Walter Copperhead. There was Evita, the girl-woman from the barrio who was sister to the boy Adam. There was Rimrock the Ansel, whom Thomas called the Oceanic Man. But first, just what is an Ansel, anyhow?
And what was Rimrock, who was a most exceptional Ansel? Ansels weren't understood at all on Astrobe, and that was their only home.
Would you tell me of your origin, Rimrock? Thomas asked him. Of yourself, personally, and of your species?
I would, but I'm not sure I can, Rimrock said. What little we know of ourselves we have learned from regular people or have guessed. When we passed through the strangeness and changed our caste, this entailed forgetting much of our beginnings. It is a childhood now shut off from us. You see, there were no Ansels to be found on Astrobe when Earthmen first came here. It wasn't until the second generation of men on Astrobe that any of us were discovered, and we were quite backward. We do not generate rapidly, but none of us die in our present memory, so we do increase in numbers. We have developed from contact with regular people, and we ourselves have more influence on people than they suspect. Children are forbidden to associate with us, but they dream about us, as do the adults. It is nonsense that the happy people of Astrobe do not have night dreams. I have walked through many thousands of those dreams myself. I cannot see that we have any limit, Thomas, though I am not clear as to what our symbiotic relation with regular people should be.
But you must know where you came from, Rimrock.
Well, we do know it, but we have garbled it in legend. Our legend is that we are the people who climbed all the way to the sky, broke holes in it, and climbed out into a strange world that is above the sky. This world that you know, the noonday world of Astrobe, is the world that is above the sky. You do not feel it, but we do. We were deep ocean creatures, Thomas. I remember, like a thing before birth, the world of the depths. But we didn't consider it as the depths. We loved to climb, to fly. Our epics were all stories of such daring. We loved the pinnacled mountains. Our heroes were those who climbed them to the highest. We flew up and ever up, establishing settlements on higher and still higher mountain ledges. We came to the beginning of light, and then to the beginnings of vision. This was the first of the strange zone that we had to cross. When we came out of it on to the higher side, we would be different creatures with minds formed again. For there had come the exciting rumor that some of the great mountain spires might actually pierce the sky itself. We had, of course, long talked to fish creatures who claimed that they had been all the way to the sky, that they had indeed leapt through holes in the sky and then fallen back. But who believes fish?
You did really talk to fish with fish, Rimrock.
Why not, Thomas? We now talk with men, who are much more intricate creatures. But this fish story was true. I remember it all, as of something from another life, the epic thing we did. I was a member of the first party. We flew and climbed higher and higher to truly dizzy heights. We went up the sheer cliffs of the edge of the World Mountain. All the strong stories were that this was the one that surely pierced the sky. We ascended more than 10 kilometers, fearful always that we would not be able to live at that height. The sky, we had believed ever since we had received wisdom, was at an infinite distance from us, and would always appear at the same distance no matter how high we climbed. We discovered that this was not so. We came closer to the sky, and we were almost hysterical in our excitement. We came all the way up to it, and touched it with our members. We did not die, as we had feared. An epic hero had done this eons before, but he had died from it. So it was no ordinary thing that we did. Rimrock had at first been talking with free movement of his rubbery mouth, but for a while his mouth had not moved, and he was talking in Thomas's head. He could speak in either manner, and he did not always realize himself when he went from the one to the other. Then we burst through, splintering holes in the sky, and came out gasping into the world that is above the sky, Rimrock recounted. To your viewpoint, we came up out of the ocean onto the land, but it is yourselves who do not appreciate the magnitude of it. You did it so long ago that you have forgotten it, both in your minds and your underminds. But how can you forget that you live on the top of the sky? How can you forget that every moment you walk, you are walking on a precarious rug, higher than a 5,000-story high building? Do you know that the highest flying birds of the air cannot rise 1/10 as high as we stand now? Thomas, I was one of the first ones who splintered the sky and came up on the sky shore, Rimrock proclaimed. I was one of the primordial heroes, and we fought that sky shore sprinkled with shells in the form of stars for signature of it. May the sense of wonder never leave me.
I begin to get the feel of you more and more, Thomas said, not in words, but in old shapes.
Regular people have sealed off the interior ocean that used to be in every man, Rimrock said. They closed the ocean and ground up its monsters for fertilizer. That is why we so often enter into people's dreams. We take the place of the monsters they have lost.
What occupations do Ansels follow? Thomas asked him.
Some are in communication, since each of us is a communications center. But most of us work as commercial divers, underwater welders, pier builders, that sort of thing. Water is still our first element. But the waters around Cathead, where I work, have become so foul from the uncontrolled industries that they bother us. The poor lungers of Cathead cough up their lungs from the contaminated air. We suffer in our 5 bladders from the contaminated water. It is a rare treat for us to get away for a day or two in clean air, or in clean ocean.
Are you paid well for your underwater work, Rimrock?
No. A Stoimanoff door a week. The Stoimanoff door is a small gold coin.
Why do you live or work for money at all? You don't wear clothes or live in houses or eat food that is sold for money. What do you do with your money?
Play Fantan, said the Ansel. Well, what was Evita? We don't know. Thomas never knew. She was never sure herself. She was one of those who had chosen Thomas, not been chosen by him.
All on Astrobe will think it strange if you do not travel with a mistress, she said. Nobody has ever done that before. They will believe that you are not in accord with the golden dream of Astrobe. I know that you would not like to seem an awkward and impossible person, and I will not allow another woman to be with you.
I am an awkward and impossible person, and it bothers me not at all, Thomas said. Leave me, you scrawny young witch. I have seen sparrows, and they still fledglings with more meat on them.
You know that's not true. What kind of fat tubs did they like in your day? I am quite well fleshed, and I've been called the most beautiful woman on Astrobe. You will also find me intelligent, and in this I'm exceptional. Astrobe, though you may not have noticed it yet, has a high level of mediocrity only.
You're misnamed, Evita. You travel falsely. You are no Ava, but the Lilith who was before her, the witch.
I am both. Did you not know that they were one? And I have a personal reason. When I decided to go to hell to prove a point, I set myself a goal, the seduction of a saint. But where else can I find one? They have not canonized one for hundreds of years. Big little Thomas, out of time and out of place. You are the only certified saint I'm ever likely to meet.
We are neither of us any longer of the flesh in that way, Thomas said. He said neither when you would say neither, one of the oddities of speech that still clung to him, and there was a burr in his talk. And you yourself are now taken by much deeper passion, Evita, he said, and it precludes the other thing. Come along then, child witch. If we ever run hungry on the heaths, we'll have you spitted, and break you up, haunch and chin, and eat you complete, and be hungry again within an hour, he joked. She was of copious build, and she smiled down on him. The color of her hair, the color of her eyes, the incredible lines of her, no, they won't be given here. You will not know them till the last day, and only if you are one of the blessed. Scrivener, Slider, Maxwell, Copperhead, who were they? What was the mind and the man of each? Hear Slider speak. Are we still dangling on the thread, or has the thread been broken even before the official act, soon to be proposed to break it? The ancient instruction was to go on all nations, but we are not the nations. We are something different. The promise was that the transcendent thing would endure till the end of the world, but we are not the world. We are quite a different world, and no promise was ever given to us. We cannot even assume that we are human. How deep does the astral mutation really go? How many of us are programmed persons? And how much of the programmed descent is in us who regard ourselves as old-line humans? We have changed in mind and body. The morality of Golden Astrobe is abysmal by any older comparison. But may we use an older comparison? On old Earth was once a thing named slavery. We do not name it that here, but we have it. It is now the instinct for finding one's place in the golden hive. Try to break out of it. Try to avail yourself of the total freedom. Meet the overriding regulations. What were once called the unnatural lusts may be natural here. They are universal. It may be that we are not in terrible shape at all. Thomas was the first to believe that we were. He now believes we are in wonderful shape. He is a wise man, and he studies us. He wonders why we sent for him. But if we are in wonderful shape, is it still the shape of man? When it becomes impossible to distinguish certain artificial things from ourselves, when we must doubt that we are still people. When the killers pursue me, then I feel that I am coming near some truth. But when they let me alone, I know that I am dealing in trivialities. Walter Copperhead, who predicts futures, says the Scrivener and I will change persons and souls in our final day. I say that we will not. How could we trade souls? He has none. Slider was a slight, pale, moody young man. He was very serious, and felt that everybody was laughing at him. Usually they were. Thomas was doing so silently as he heard this screed. He had known such young men before. Slider himself, knowing who Thomas was, expected something more of him. He was shocked by his lack of depth. Slider, out of his own deep insufficiency, intended to supply that lack. Hear Scrivener speak. I would declare myself enthusiastically for all things of Astrobe, were enthusiasm an element of the true Astrobe character. It isn't, and it should not be. We are the first mature beings ever, and enthusiasm is no part of us. In Astrobe we had built the perfect world. Perhaps it should have ended in its state of perfection, but it did not end. Instead, our world has become infected with a cancerous growth. Cut it out, we say. But for some reason, we hesitate.
Slider is part of that cancer. He has doubts, and doubt is the essence of this enemy. Of course we are not the nations or the world. We are beyond such. Of course no promise was ever given to us. We make the promises to ourselves. There is none above us to make it. How deep does the Astrobe mutation go? It goes from the bottom to the top, as it should. Of course we are no longer in the shape of men. Mankind was the awkward childhood of our species. We do well to forget it. We will excise our last flaw, and then we will achieve realization and annihilation. The killers do not trail me. Why should they? I am of their own species. And Walter Copperhead reads this future wrong. Slider and myself can never change places. He has no place.
Scrivener was a bigger man than Slider, but he was softer and fatter, both in speech and person. He had a programmed father and a human mother. Though young, he did have a sort of Astrobian maturity. Slider and Scrivener thought of themselves as deep opposites, and yet Thomas and the others tended to confuse them. They were so alike in their fuming differences. Hear Maxwell speak.
I take myself as an example that Astrobe is not perfect, even accepting the cancerous growth of Cathead in the barrio. I am an aberration. A perfect world would not be made up of perfectly integrated persons, and I am not one. There are no words for my particular wandering from the normal. Only Copperhead knows me well enough to have any idea what they are. I will only say that I have a very loose attachment to my own body. I have not always been in the same form. I do not always recognize my previous forms. The great Astrobian advance was bound to throw off such reactions as myself. And yet I am enthusiastically for Astrobe, in a way that Scrivener cannot be. Enthusiasm may not be a part of finest Astrobe, but it is a part of me. I likewise believe that we must kill the Cathead mutation, though it will be killing part of myself to do it. No mind. I have had parts of me killed before. I have had whole bodies killed. I am a spook, and Astrobe does not believe in such, but for all that, I believe in her. I burn myself up for this thing. I mean it literally. I have burnt myself up and died several times, though I do not understand it. I will still be the burning brand for this thing.
This Maxwell was a most curious-looking man, if he was a man. When he said that he had a very loose attachment to his own body, he apparently meant that he did not always inhabit the same body in the usual sense. But his appearance was that he had a very loose attachment to his own body, in that his body was too big for him, and fitted him loosely. There are animals who have this looseness in their hides, the earth tiger and the Astrobe Lazarus lion, and in them it is a sign of strength and swiftness. In Maxwell, it was a sign of weakness and slowness, almost of witlessness. It was a good-sized, swarthy, almost sinister body that he wore, and it was a sepulchral voice he spoke with. But one had the impression that he had to stand on tiptoes to see out of his own eyes, and that he was piping a small voice into the resounding thing as though it were an independent instrument. He wasn't a particular ornament to the retinue, either personally or mentally, yet he had a real seriousness that made that of Slider and Scrivener seem brittle. Hear Copperhead speak. Now a part of that speaking had been with a certain rough men of Cathead.
Will he?
Battersea had asked Copperhead sharply.
He will,
said Copperhead. I don't see how, said George the Syrian. He doesn't look like much. I'll bet the forces of Astrobe will smash him like a rotten egg.
Oh, they'll smash him all right, Copperhead explained. The new man is a dead man. His time runs out almost before it begins. So he's been dead before. It won't help him now. He will fumble it all, our new man. He'll do only one small thing right.
But you say he'll maintain his ways in this present, Shanty growled.
He will. And in the damnedest left-handed way anybody ever saw,
Copperhead maintained.
What instruments they do work with, whoever they are. Men. This ferret-eyed stubby man from the doubtful past will save our world. That is what matters. That he won't save himself doesn't matter to me, to none of us, I believe.
It will matter to me,
Paul said, but the thing about this Copperhead was that he really could predict futures.
I do have powers. I'm a new thing. Why should you suppose that a new thing would be one of the elite? Unacceptable, a sensitive. No new thing has ever appeared as such. Always it comes tainted with dirty hands. If a doctorate professor of the physical should announce a new thing in a sensitive individual, one might be tempted to consider it. But to believe that it comes out of Cathead, in the form of a fortune-teller on Fortune-teller's Row, boggles the imagination and sets up shouts of disbelief. It's true, though. I may be the least sensitive man who's ever lived. I'm crude. I live by fraud. But I can see the future.
Copperhead had something goatish in his appearance. He was a good-humored satyr, and he was crude. Rimrock understood from the beginning, and Maxwell had learned accidentally, that Copperhead did have depths of sensitivity and intelligence and compassion, but he chose to hide these things. People, they were a funny-looking party. Rimrock the Ansel, Tall Paul and Stubby Thomas, Slider and Scrivener, Maxwell and Copperhead, and the bewildering Evita. Had she gray eyes, or blue, or green? Had she smoky blonde, or golden, or dark hair? Was she slight, or was she buxom? The fact is that all saw her differently, and all heard her voice differently. It sounded now, but did it ring out, or bubble up, or purr, or croon, or lilt, or laugh, or intone? Was it a flute, or a trumpet, or a 9-stringed lyra? Was it a silver cymbal, or a bronze conceitus?
Be quiet, everyone,
Evita sounded, for words cannot give an idea of the harmonies in her.
Holy Thomas is hatching an idea. See him sparkle when a whim settles to him. He has sampled all the great things of Astrobe, and has told himself how wonderful they are. Then why is he looking at the mountain?
It was a sharp shock to all of them, the thing that had taken hold of Thomas now. The most practical of all men was in a trance. Rimrock remembered the great day when he himself had splintered holes in the sky and broken through. Maxwell recalled an ecstasy in an earlier body. Copperhead relived the moment when the new power came to a man with dirty hands. Paul remembered what he had almost been, and Evita relived aspects of her own legend. Slider and Scrivener may not have been capable of such flights.
Why do I look at the mountain?
Thomas asked as he came out of his daze.
An Astrobe psychologist has told me that only people crippled in their personalities will look at such things as mountains. He says that this was much more common in former centuries. Well, I have sampled Golden Astrobe, and it is wonderful, but I am still hungry. What if we do go in that direction? If we go in that direction, we walk, Scrivener said. There are no transportation booths in the feral regions, only in the civilized. That region is all beyond the pale. It is for beasts, if they still live, but not for men. The mountains are retained. They are somehow a key to the weather control. But they are no concern of rational people. I believe that we will walk for a day or two and see the mountain, Thomas said.
The programmed killers aren't inhibited at all there, Maxwell told him. They will follow and kill us.
They aren't invincible. Let's go to the mountain, Thomas repeated. What if we climb and cross the mountain at that saddle and go thence? And what if we follow around that circle thereby? Thomas asked, pointing. Around that circuit of the feral country, a hard footway, and in 7 or 9 days you will come to Big Cathead from its backside, Copperhead said. Some of us will die of it, but not all. There's an old proverb. I haven't lost anything on the mountain, but I believe that I may have, and I'd like to find it again. I'll go willingly with you. It's stark madness to go there, Scrivener insisted. Not at all, Thomas said. A soft sort of madness it may be. We hadn't such mountains in England, and I saw them only at a distance in Spain and Savoy. In the stated problem of Astrobe, everyone has been overlooking something. Were it not odd if the high mountains were the one thing that people could not see? Let the programmed killers trail us. I always liked either end of a hunt. Come along now. I'll not be done out of this.